So, ladies and gentlemen, if you go back to this morning, we were talking about some British tanks, how we were designing a tank that we hoped to get into service in 1945. Its design, it gets there a few weeks too late. Something called Operation Centurion. We take the first Centurion tanks from Germany, we test them, and everybody starts liking them. We think this is going to be a really good tank. And coming on now is the last model of that Centurion as a gun tank in British service, the Mark 13. So why was this such an important tank for Britain? Well, one of the reasons is, as we made the tank, there was an awful lot of tanks in Europe at the end of the Second World War. These were passed on to other nations, but we're also now entering the time of the Cold War. The idea of the Eastern Bloc countries under Soviet domination, Warsaw Pact it was sometimes called, versus the capitalist countries of the West, NATO. That's why NATO is formed. And this terrible thought that our tanks compared to some of those tanks we've seen in things like the Berlin Victory Parade, tanks like the Russian heavy JS2, 3, and we know they're building bigger tanks. What are we going to do about that in terms of firepower? Now for the British Centurion, we start with that's the one we've got the firepower. We've got the 20-pounder gun going on the Centurion. Weight of solid shot in steel that gun would fire. But there's still a worry. In the early 1950s, we've seen the T-34-85, we've now seen the T-54 tank. We are really worrying about what might come next. Get your spotter books out there, another Leopard coming on behind, Chieftain, Mark 11 Chieftain coming along there. And then behind that a T-72. And very last of all coming out, Challenger 1. We see a captured T-54 briefly in the British Embassy compound in Hungary during the uprising. We measure the thickness of the armour on the T-54. We go away and say our 20-pounder gun on the Centurion is not good enough. We're going to have to get another one. So down at Radi in Kent, they design a new gun. That's the gun that you can see on this Mark 13 here. L7 105mm gun, firing, armour piercing, discarding Sabo ammunition better than this 120 gun on the M103. Now, why that's important, we copied the Americans, their 120 gun, we put it on our Conqueror tank, same idea, whopping great tank, you can see one inside the museum, big cast turret, again this idea, out to watch the Russian tanks. When we put the one inside the Centurion, when you have a tanking service, different countries have different ideas, different ways to hold things when we get a new one. Ultimately do that, although the Centurion pass down the line, some are used till quite late for artillery observation roles, engineer variants, etc. But ultimately we end up trying to put the system in the main battle tank role that the Centurion was trying to fulfill. Now, there were plenty of countries that were prepared to buy our chieftains when we got rid of them. And one of the countries that fell in love with the chieftain tank was Israel. And the Israelis not only bought tanks from Britain, but they also, when other countries got rid of them, like South Africa, Switzerland, Dutch, they buy them all. And they take them out to Israel. Sometimes they use them as they were. What they tended to do, though, was improve on them. So again, like other countries that copied that, we've got a Swedish Centurion with a later engine, not the original Meteor, with a petrol first petrol engine. They put a diesel engine in place. And that was the first when it first comes out, so to the advantage of your country. The last actual variant of the Centurion in British Army service was the beach armoured recovery vehicle, and that was basically a Centurion hull with the sides built up that would push landing craft off the beach. We replaced that with some German Leopard variants later on called Hippos. They were still in service till about 2003, then we've got one in the collection here. So a stunningly effective and brilliant to the UK tank, because as you said, of the 8,000 produced, about half of them were sold around the world. And in post-World War Britain, we were bankrupt. We really needed that